真空
What's going on, people? System Psycho back with my comrade Josh.
So
today's video is going to be a retro review. This isn't going to be on a particular game, but it's going to be on a particular console and its games, and that is the TurboGrafx-16.
Yo.
Old school shit, 16-bit goodness. One of the main reasons why I personally want to do this is because Josh here actually had a TurboGrafx back in the day. Like, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even know what a TurboGrafx is. He was honestly the only guy I knew that had one, and he had a slew of games. We definitely grew up playing this console, and we just want to share our thoughts and reviews of what we think about the console, certain games that came out for it, and whether or not you guys should go and check out some of these titles.
yeah, I got the console the first year it dropped in North America, 1990 Christmas, and I remember too, it was really cool because I begged my parents for this console all year long. Like, I really wanted it.
Really?
You know? Yeah, it was.
So what was it about this one and not the Sega Genesis? Because the Genesis came out like a year before.
Right. So I was an arcade. Like, me and Psycho both were arcade kids growing up. I mean, we used to go to the arcade a lot, you know. And the thing is that I didn't know that Sega Genesis was going to be such a big arcade system.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of arcade ports that had been rumored to be coming out for TurboGrafx-16.
Okay.
And being an arcade kid, that was what kind of geared me towards it. And I was like, you know, I want this system. Like, this is going to be the system that's for me, you know? And I just remember I begged my parents all year for it. And they were like, yeah, you know, I don't know if you're gonna get it, and that shit was expensive when it came out, dude. Like I don't even know how my parents afforded that, to be honest with you.
For real?
But yeah, it was a grip like that. I think that when it actually released, I want to say that it was like at like the 250 mark.
Cool.
Yeah.
For real?
So I mean, like, it was like
25 years ago, 250.
yeah,
That's
it was expensive, you know. And I just remember, like, I opened up all my presents, and this was actually funny. I opened up all my presents, and I was disappointed because I didn't get the TurboGrafx-16, right?
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
like, I go in my room and I'm playing with whatever else like I had opened up, and then my mom was like, "Oh, we missed a present." Yo, I ran out of my room so fast into the thing, and like, I just saw the box, and even with it wrapped, I knew exactly what was in that box, and I ripped that thing open. I saw the two kids' faces on that thing. I was like, "Oh shit, it's about to go on. Like, this is it." You know?
So did he give you any games or?
Yeah. So the first games that I got with it was I got the launch title.
Okay.
Keith Courage and Alpha Zone. I remember that game, and I remember putting it in, right, because it was a Hue card, you know. So you put that in, and like, I had played the Sega Master System back in the day. So like, I knew what a Hue card was, so I put that thing in and I turn it on, and like, the thing starts flashing. I'm like, man, this is gonna be fucking awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And then I see this fucking little kid. And I was like, I'm not gonna lie, like, my level of excitement from the cover, like seeing the dude with the sword and all that, my level of excitement was like, it was like way up here. And then I saw that, I was like, what the fuck is this?
Okay.
So I go through the first level, right? I get through the first level, I'm like, alright, this is alright. But then the second, in between, the cutscene in between, and he gets into that
big ass rainbow?
Yeah, and he starts like building up and stuff. I was like, oh, now this is gonna be the shit right here.
Alright, so before we get into like certain games that we fucked with or games that we liked, I just want to talk about the console and like the controllers and things like that, graphics. Like, what were your thoughts on the console itself? Because it, you know, I remember it was weird because you had it, and I remember the console itself, the back part would come off.
Yeah.
And it would be like a weird ass little like thing at the end. I don't know what that cover was for, what it was protecting, but and the controller as well. I felt like the controller length was kind of short, and it only had one controller port.
Yeah.
You know. So what are your thoughts on like all that?
Yeah, so that was weird because I remember getting it and you know, being used to like Master System and being used to NES, and you had two control ports.
True,
you know?
yeah.
So I'm like, how the fuck am I gonna play this with friends? And like, then I was like, wait a minute, this is gonna be like an arcade console with like no like two-player games. Like, yeah, like I was taken back by that at first. Now the back part of it, I knew.
Okay.
Because they dropped like real early in the development of it. It wasn't Game Pro, but it was like Electronic Gamer Monthly or something like that. One of those like gamer magazines back in the day. Had done like a whole spread about the TurboGrafx-16 and its launch, and they had explained that the next generation was going to be CD.
Okay, so that was already like the CD add-on part.
Yeah, so you already knew that was going to be going to be the future. And I don't think it was until like maybe a year later. Like I think that it went through a full year before they came out with the multi-tab adapter.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Because I remember you had the multi-tab.
Yeah, to play up the 4-player. Yeah, I think it was almost a full year before that.
And like I said earlier, man, the length of the cords were like
oh yeah, dude. It was bad because like I remember in the house that I was growing up in when I had this console, like the couch was way back from the TV.
I remember that.
So like you literally had to sit on the floor like up on the TV screen to play that shit. Actually, not until you just mentioned that shit did that like come back in my head.
Yeah, I remember that shit, man. But one thing I do like about it was the controller actually had where you could speed it up.
Yep.
It was kind of like one of those like off-brand controllers where you could have the turbo stuff. So you know, if you didn't want to keep tapping the button, you just hit the button. And
yeah,
that was pretty cool.
That came in handy for the type of games that were
like if you did it for bonks.
Yeah, oh dude, that shit was Bonk, dude. We'll talk about bonks.
Well, actually, getting into it, let's talk about some games. So the first one we'll talk about is Bonks, which pretty much was what the main character.
That was their mascot. So you had Nintendo, who had Mario. You had
got these right here.
Genesis that had Sonic, and so the mascot character for the TurboGrafx-16 was Bonk, a
big ass
caveman with a giant fucking head.
And so there was only 3 games for the TurboGrafx: Bonks, Bonk's Revenge, and Bonk 3: The Big Adventure.
Yep.
Which was actually pretty fun. I like those games. Games are dope.
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, Bonk was a weird character too, man, because it was like, you know, you go through and his name was Bonk, and what you did to like, instead of jumping on characters like traditional games, like you would bonk them with your head. Like, you know, it was fucking weird. And then you eat pieces of meat, which made you angry. And so you get angrier every time you eat meat.
And you turn to like Super Mario where you get the star.
Yeah.
You're like invincible for a
Yeah,
while.
and then you get like this big like double bonk head, you know, and you like be able to run through, and like that was like basically like Mario with the star, where you could just like run through the level and do that. But I remember what was really cool is that the bosses looked really cartoony.
That's one thing about the game I really liked, because it was so colorful and it was, like you said, cartoony. And the characters, the bosses were big.
Yeah.
You know, like what people, I don't know if people remember, but back in the day when 16-bit or 8-bit had big characters, you're like, wow, that's a big deal, dude.
Yeah.
Like, holy shit.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, that was something that was kind of signature for TurboGrafx-16. Was the big character bosses. There's that one character in Bonk where like he had like, it was the dinosaur that had like the skull head, and like he'd have to like jump on his head and break the skull head, and that motherfucker was big. Like he was like the size of your screen. So yeah, that was dope.
Bonk is definitely one of I personally think is one of the better side-scrolling platformers of that day, of that era.
Yeah, oh absolutely.
I would agree with that.
And the thing is, like, honestly, I can still play a game like Bonk because it does have like that cartoony feel to it. You know, so I feel like it aged well.
It definitely did. I think so. I would agree with that too. Alright, so let's talk about the next game. Blazing Lasers. This is one of your favorites. I know you want to talk about this. What is it about this game that just like you love?
Yeah, it's funny because like I have like this bittersweet moment right now because Kanye West like a few months back said like brought this game up, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was like, oh man, like this is great. Like this game is finally gonna get the recognition it deserves. I was a huge fan of Shmups coming up, man. Like I remember playing like all the 1940 games that were on NES, and I remember going to the arcade, and that was like the big thing that I would look for at the arcade, was like Shmups, because it was like so much shit going on on the screen, you know, and like all the shooting, and you know, talking about that controller, like you could on TurboGrafx-16 you could hit that turbo thing and you hit it, and like you were like you just like shoot like crazy. So the thing with Blazing Lasers is that it was an interesting game because it was a top view. It's the top view shmup, and you know you move side to side and up and down just like most traditional shmups are. But the thing that was really cool about it was like the way that it gravitated. You would gravitate up real slow, but everything would come in at you. So like you would level up your weapons by like shooting these asteroids, and you'd break the asteroids open, or you'd shoot like these little orbs open, and they would give you like Roman numerals. It'd be like 1, 2, 3, and 4. That would give you different weapons. Well, the thing was like the enemies that were coming after you would come from different sides of the screen and all around. So it wasn't like that traditional where they just come down from the top and they come out. You would see them come down from the top, but while they were coming down from the top, there'd be like these turrets that would be moving around in circles and shooting at you from all directions. And like this was really before like bullet hell games were like a big thing. So like this was kind of like
one of the
what I felt like was like the
start.
Yeah, it was like the start of like that bullet hell type feel, because there were talking about like those asteroids. Like you would shoot those asteroids and they would break apart, and they would actually become part of the screen. So in different levels, like there's one level where like there's like these spider things that come down at you, and you would shoot them and they'd break apart into other little spiders, and then like ships would come down and they'd start shooting at you and stuff like that. So, you know, that was a real early entry of like a bullet hell style game, and that's just really what caught me about it. And again, TurboGrafx-16 was just known for these bright, colorful games, and that was one of them.
Definitely. I know Blazing Lasers is a fan favorite of TurboGrafx, like, lovers.
Yeah.
It definitely is, and it's actually one of the cheaper games too, which is actually pretty good if you guys want to go out and get it. It's one of the really cheaper ones. But going along with the shmups, TurboGrafx is pretty much notorious for shmups, and the one I wanted to talk about is Air Zonk. It's pretty much my favorite game for the TurboGrafx because it mixes Blazing Lasers with Bonk, and it's just dope, dude. But this one is not top down. This one is more like R-type, where it's to the side, and so it's like there's not that many levels, but I haven't been able to beat it. Difficulty is pretty solid, but I love the character Zonk. They were trying to make him kind of like a mascot, but I guess they failed to do that. But I mean, the game is very colorful, very cartoony, fun. Soundtrack is dope. Everything about this game is tight, man. And from what I hear, I know you remember we talked about this a while back. This was kind of a hard game to find even back in the day.
Yeah.
So not too many people even were able to play it back in the day.
Yeah, it was one of the. I don't know if it was like one of the last generation games to come out for the console. But I do remember when it dropped, it was difficult to find, and especially because it was we showed you Bonk before, so Air Zonk. Zonk was, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was a cyborg that was sent by Bonk, or it was Bonk in a cyborg form, or something like that, and that's the way that it was marketed.
Oh, really?
So like I remember like when that game was about to release, like everybody was really excited about it, and Bonk 3 was another really hard one to find, and they came out like back to back. So it was like at that release time the system was starting to go out, so a lot of retailers weren't carrying it. But if you have a chance to get this game or to play this game, Air Zonk is awesome.
A+ in my book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Alright, next game we want to talk about is another one that is dear to our heart, Ninja Spirit. Yep. This was a game you had back in the day, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what is it about this game? This is like the Ninja Gaiden of the TurboGrafx.
It was. Talking about the big characters on the screen, talking about the colors, talking about just the, just the presentation of the TurboGrafx. Ninja Spirit was one of those games that it just encompassed what that system really was. And what was really cool about it is like you were a ninja, and it was a side scroller, much like Ninja Gaiden in that vein, and you'd fight like these sub-level characters and stuff, and then you would work your way up to a boss. But as you would go on, you would have little chain characters that would follow you, which were your they were your clones, but as shadows. And so you would jump up and they would be able to attack, so you could jump up to a different level, and then they would like chain down and then they would hit. And it was just cool. I mean, like the gameplay itself was so fluid, and the response on when you would hit attacks and jumping and just the movement of the game, the fluidity was done so well back then. And I just remember playing it, and I was like, man, this is what I want. Like, this is what I want in a home console. And that was just one of those games where, like, everybody else was talking about games on Genesis, and I want to say that when Ninja Spirit came out was right around like the birth of like when Super Nintendo had been released over here in North America.
Yeah.
So you were getting all your friends that were like, you know, all big on this, and here I'm talking about this game called Ninja Spirit, right? And it was like me and 2 classmates that knew what the fuck that was, and everybody else was like, no, but Super Mario World's pretty dope. And it's like, hey, fuck you. Like,
All right, so moving on. Not only did the TurboGrafx have side-scrolling platformers, shmups, but they also had role-playing games.
Yeah.
One of the role-playing games we want to talk about is Nutopia.
Yeah.
This is like what, the Zelda of the TurboGrafx, you would say?
It's a Zelda clone.
It's a Zelda clone.
That's honestly what it is,
Yeah.
you know. And I was a big fan of the original Zelda on NES.
Mm-hmm.
I did not give a fuck about the second Zelda.
Okay.
Link's
Adventure?
Yeah, that game honestly.
It's not really
No,
regarded as
it's
one
a
of the best
terrible
ones.
like side scroller, and it was shit.
Yeah.
And then, so I remember my favorite Zelda game, even more than Ocarina of Time, because I don't really fuck with Ocarina of Time like that, but is A Link to the Past, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually played A Link to the Past before discovering Nutopia.
Okay.
And I played A Link to the Past, and I remember just loving that game and being like, man, I need to find another game that's like this, you know? And now there are some other Zelda clones that are good out there. There's a lot of shitty ones out there. So I remember a friend of mine that I went to, I was in elementary and middle school with, and he said, have you ever heard of a game called Nutopia?
Oh, really?
On TurboGrafx-16.
Okay.
And I was like, no, what is it? And he was like, dude, if you like A Link to the Past, you gotta play this game. And dude, it did not disappoint.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I love that.
Is it similar to Link to the Past, would you say? Like,
yeah, it is. It's very similar to it. I mean, graphically, it's not. I mean, I feel like Link to the Past is probably one of the better graphical games on the like Super Nintendo. You know what I mean? So if you're looking for something, if you're a graphics whore, like this is not, like Nutopia's not gonna be the one that you're gonna look at it and be like, Josh, you fucking idiot, you know. But if you just like the gameplay and the style of the game, then yeah, Nutopia.
That's the shit.
Man. That's the shit.
All right, so the next game we really want to talk about. This game is honestly probably one of my favorite games as a kid growing up, and that is Bomberman '93.
Yep.
What's funny about this game is I didn't even know what Bomberman was until I played this. Like, you know, Bomberman was on the NES, you know, and so Super NES obviously, but it was Bomberman '93 where I first experienced it, and it was actually one of the games where I noticed that it was like co-op, like 4 players could play on it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And so that was like, that blew my mind as a kid, and on top of that, this shit is just fun as fuck. Like,
yeah, oh, it is. Awesome game.
Yeah.
I remember, okay, so this game, I remember being at Toys R Us.
Okay.
And I saw this game on display. And, I mean, I'm a cartoon head.
Yeah.
Man, you know, like, I keep going back to that on this system. But this is really what brought, you know, between arcades and cartoons, that was my life as a child growing up. You know?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it, and I'm like, yo, this looks like a straight up cartoon,
Yeah.
you know? So, again, begging my mom, like, can I please get this game? Can I please get this game? And she finally gave in. She was like, yeah, go ahead and pick it up.
Nice.
You know? And I was like, all right. So I got it back to the house, and I remember playing it. And there were some 2 kids that lived across the street, like diagonal from me, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember like telling them, like, yo, I got this new game, yo, I gotta come and check it out. And I had gotten the multi-tap, right? So we like hook it up, and I had all 4 controls. But it was only 3 of us, so it was a game that we could all 3 play. Dude, we must have played that game for like 6 straight hours.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, dude. Like, and to this day, I'm a huge Bomberman fan. Like anytime that a Bomberman drops, like I am so quick to go and pick it up.
The thing about Bomberman, it's funny because there's been slew of Bombermans after this one.
Yes.
But this one is always the one that I like kind of like compare it to. Like if it doesn't compare to this one, then it ain't shit. Like cause this one was just like, it was like the definitive version to me, man.
It is.
Yeah.
I feel like like honestly, if I were to rank all the Bombermans in order, Bomberman '93 is the top dog. Like it is, and it's not just because of the nostalgia of playing it as a kid. I mean, it's to this day, I can still jump back on the Bomberman 93, and like maybe the controlling's not as smooth as like something like Bomberland that came out for like Wii a while back. Like the controlling, it still has a little of a lag to it compared to the newer versions of it, but I feel like the levels are just more vast. Like just the way that the bomb schemes play out, like everything in general, even the fire patterns are just like, it's just dope as fuck.
It was one of the first that did this. Like pretty much all the Bombermans after this pretty much got the stuff from this one. You know, there's Super Bomberman 2 for Super Nintendo, and even Saturn Bomberman. People love that one, which I think is amazing. But this one will always be like fucking amazing.
Yeah, that's a 5-star.
That's a 5 stars.
Fuck up,
5 stars. So going off of arcades, you know, since we were big arcade heads, and the TurboGrafx was just an awesome console for these types of genres and games, we want to talk about a couple of games that were pretty much heavy-hitting arcade games and that were really good ports on the console. So the first one we want to talk about is Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. Was a game that also came out for the NES, which was pretty much similar, but graphically and color-wise, you know, it was a little different, obviously, because the TurboGrafx had better graphics.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, like back in the 90s, if you went to arcades, if you went to like the arcades that always pushed the new games and stuff, Jackie Chan was not as popular in North America until probably the later 90s, right? So true. So in the early 90s, like it was more a thing that was based in Hong Kong because of the Hong Kong cinema boom. So you really had to seek this game out.
No bullshit.
And I remember there was only one arcade in this entire area that had the arcade game.
Okay.
So I remember going and I remember playing it, and I was like, I was so mesmerized by it. And so like one of my really, really good friends growing up was who I used to watch Kung Fu movies with religiously. He had a TurboGrafx-16 also, and he had Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu.
He actually had it?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And so he put it in. And I was like, oh man, and I remember the NES one, and I was like, that shit doesn't even compare to the arcade.
Okay.
So he put that game in,
and
dude, it was just like, it brought back all these fucking memories of playing Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu, and it's a great port. It really is.
That shit is, dude. I love it because like big heads, you know, like going back to the character, big heads, simple side scrolling, and it's just fun, dude. Like those old school shits, man. Like I don't even know what to say. I'm like lost for words, dude. The NES one is still good too. I remember quick story. I remember when I was in middle school, back when Funkoland, GameStop now, but back when Funkoland used to sell the NES games, they used to have like a sheet with all the NES games and all the titles, right? And I remember I kept calling and was like, do you have Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu? Every day I'd call. Like I didn't understand how it worked back then, how you'd have to get games traded in or whatever.
Right.
But I'd call them every day, could you check if you got Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu? They never had it. Never had it, dude. I never found it. I had to get that shit on eBay like decades later, like a decade later, but the game is pretty dope. I think it's a really good game. So I guess the other arcade games, you know, we want to talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about individually, but we can talk about like Splatterhouse, for instance, was another game that I think TurboGrafx really marketed kind of hard because Splatterhouse, this was like, the TurboGrafx was the only console that had Splatterhouse.
Yeah, it was really the only console that at that time that was pushing a horror style game.
Yeah.
I mean, because horror style games failed miserably before that, like Friday the 13th or video game, Nightmare on Speed. I mean, they were just pure shit, you know? And like, so like nobody was really fucking with that genre back then. And then like Splatterhouse was another one. Like if you were in the arcades, you played the fuck out of Splatterhouse. I mean, Splatterhouse at one point was in almost every arcade, and people would line up to play it because it was so brutal, you know. And then they did a fucking awesome port.
Yeah, and then the Genesis later had Part 2 and Part 3.
Yeah, and what was the PS3 and Xbox 360 dropped one a couple years back that was,
they brought it back.
You know, I mean, it was,
it was okay. Yeah. I tried to get into it, I couldn't. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little different. So moving on, Tiger Road, that's another arcade game.
Yep.
That was a pretty good port for the TurboGrafx, made by Capcom actually.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, the thing that was cool about Tiger Road is that it's very similar to Ninja Spirit, so if you're into that style of game, definitely check it out.
Yeah. Next one, Dragon Spirit. another game. This was another shmup.
Yeah.
Top View also came out for the NES.
Came out for the NES also. Yep.
Yeah, definitely. And the last one is Raiden. Raiden is a pretty popular series amongst the whole shmup community.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about that, you know. So, I mean, I know you had some story about the Raiden game.
Yeah, I remember playing Raiden back in the day, and I didn't even know what it was, you know. And this was coming off of playing. Playing like the 19 series, you know, 1940 series, and I don't remember which game it was, but I had played that, and I went again to the arcade and saw Raiden, and I was like, oh fuck, this is great, you know. So I remember playing that. So when I found out it was coming out for TurboGrafx-16, I was so fucking excited that I'm like, yo, I'm finally gonna have this at my house, you know, I get to play it. I looked fucking everywhere for that game and could not find it. I mean, that was one of those games that I just. I never owned it, you know. It's like one that slipped my grasp. You know? But my younger self, you know, just could never get it.
But I remember, you know, back in the day, we're not going to talk too much about them, but you had a ton of games. Sinistron.
Yeah,
Sinistron was another one. You know, like you said, Galaga 90.
Galaga 90.
Pac-Land. You even had the carrying case.
Yeah,
you know,
dude.
You were like the poster boy for TurboGrafx back in the day.
TurboGrafx-16. That's why I love it. Like when I see like all like the game heads that are on YouTube, you know, and they got like these mass followings and they keep talking, they keep pushing the TurboGrafx-16. I'm like, man, you know, that was me when I was a kid. You know, like I was from that generation that loved it back then, and I'm glad to see that it's picking up and it's picked up the steam. But dude, the prices, man, and you know, the prices are just jacked. And we're gonna do a video on that, guys, about the retro game collecting. But honestly, that's the thing that kills me is you know, I have so many fond memories of the TurboGrafx-16, and unfortunately, that's what it is. You know, it's memories for me.
Fucking memories. I mean, they have an EverDrive where they have all the games on one little thing and you can play it, but
I'm too lazy.
But in the end, I mean, the way to end this, how do you feel TurboGrafx overall compares to the consoles of that generation, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo? Do you feel like, obviously it didn't do as well, but do you still think that it was still ahead of its time? You think it was still a good system for what it was?
I think for the time it was very hard, because it was like, you know, people were really into that mainstream gaming, and the Nintendo was such a big system. So, you know, just the name Nintendo alone held so much strength, and the name Sega alone held so much strength in the gaming market across the world, that, you know, people were flooding to get those systems. And I feel like TurboGrafx-16 unfortunately came out at a time when the market was already in the favor of the two giants.
Okay.
And that they were basically fighting an uphill battle that they were just not going to win.
Okay.
I think as far as the game quality goes, you know, it didn't have an expansive library, so it did have a lot of quality games, because it didn't get to the point where it got out of hand. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of shitty TurboGrafx games too, so it's not a console that I would look to like do like a complete collection for myself. I mean, I know you love the system, like you keep going for it, but you know, I feel like it holds its own in the nostalgia market, and I feel like it's aged very well, and there's still a lot of titles you can go and you can still play to this day. I just feel like when it came out, it was just the wrong time.
Yeah, man, unfortunately. But fortunately, we did experience it.
Yes, we did.
And we have these memories.
Yep.
Locked in.
Yes.
So that's why we wanted to share that with you guys. So I guess we'll just end it like that. You guys have any comments? If you guys have any memories of the TurboGrafx, let us know. We'd actually like to know, because we don't know too many people who have memories of the TurboGrafx. Yeah. If you guys, you know, collect for it, anything, let us know. We want to read your comments.
All things TurboGrafx.
All things TurboGrafx, man. So once again, guys, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, iTunes. You know, just keep supporting us, watching our videos. We're gonna continue to make these video game videos, comic book videos, podcasts, all that good shit. We'll leave all the links down below. Once again, guys, peace out.